You are listening to the Glenabbey podcast. My name is Chris Cooke, and in today's conversation, I'll be talking with Crowe, Jenni McClelland, and Gemma Potter on the topic of building gospel bridges. Welcome, everybody. It is lovely to have you along this evening. I'm going to go round the table in our podcast room. We're recording this on Friday, 13th of September. A couple of days before we talk about building gospel bridges on a Sunday morning in church. So with me, I've got Crowe, I've got Gemma Potter, and I've got Jenni, nearly said Lennox, Jenni McClelland. Got Jenni McClelland in the room with me. And I'm just going to go around the room and ask you guys to introduce yourself. So Caroline, you're sitting straight across from me, so I'll start with you to just introduce yourself for anybody who doesn't know you.
Hi, I'm Caroline. I am a nurse in the intensive care unit in the Royal Victoria Hospital, and I have two children, Harry and Ruby, who are year 8 and year 9 at Ballyclare High, and I'm married to Andrew, who is also working in the hospital, in the Belfast City Hospital. Brilliant.
And what are you involved in here in Glenabbey?
In Glenabbey, Andrew and I co-lead the Cloughlin Lane Home Group with Mark and Louise Jones, is probably the main thing that we do. And I also am on the organising team for the Women's Conference. A little plug there, 19th of October, Saturday. Get your tickets. And yeah.
Brilliant.
That's me.
Brilliant. And we were just talking about that beforehand. You did the interview with Keith last Sunday morning, and just before we started, you were complaining about the photo that Andrew took of you and posted on social media, but we'll say no more about that. Gemma, could you introduce yourself as well to us?
Yes, I'm Gemma. I'm also a nurse in the cancer centre. I'm married to Tim, and I have two children. Brody's gone into year 8 and Bethany's in P6.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And how long have you guys been around Glenabbey now?
We started coming, I think, in 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
So around 6 years.
Yeah,
and you are in the home group with Caroline?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Jenni, then, tell us about yourself, for those people who don't know you.
I'm Jenni McClelland.
Yes.
Used to be Lennox. Always Lennox. So, I am married to Daniel. We have 3 children, to count there. Lucy is 10. Joseph is 8. And Rory is 5.5. That half's very important. I am a primary school teacher. Used to work with you, Chris. Remember those days?
I
do.
Good
well,
days. Yeah. The good old halcyon days. Yeah.
I am definitely not a nurse. That is one thing I could not do. So hats off to you. So no, and I've been coming to Glenabbey for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, I know that.
And I am a home group leader as well, just the last 6 months. So Brilliant. It's been a great wee journey.
How's that going?
It's been going brilliantly. Yeah. Really, really good. So yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Super. Okay. Normally in these conversations, I begin just to get you relaxed by asking you a little question, either about a book you've recently read or a film you've recently watched and hopefully enjoyed, or if you can't think of either of those, a Google search that you've recently made. So I'll go around the same order. Caroline, you can start. Where are you going?
So, recent book, well, I'm 2/3 of the way through. This is totally not spiritual at all. It is a Colleen Hoover novel called, let me get this right, It Starts With Us. Uh-huh. And yeah, I love a wee romance novel, like I do.
Sounds like my wife.
I had been to the cinema and watched It Ends With Us. I was a Gossip Girl fan back in the day, so Blake Lively was in it, so I went to see it. And then this is like the sequel book to that, so yeah.
Okay. Good so far?
Yeah, really good, yeah.
Super. Gemma, what about you?
Mine, so the last book I finished is not spiritual either. It's
it's going well so far.
Oh no, Thursday Murder Club, the latest one, The Last Devil to Die. Yeah, that's the one.
Very good.
I've just finished.
And recommend that as well?
Yeah, I've loved that whole series.
That's your guy of Pointless, is it? No, or am I mixing this up? No, right? No.
Is it? I
No,
don't
I
know.
think I'm
It
mixing it up.
sounds like something I'd probably like.
Okay.
Anyway, they're
Maybe not.
good books.
Good. Jenni, what about you?
I'm not going for a book apart from the Bible and Ephesians. Got to get that in. I spend probably too much time on Pinterest looking up cake ideas actually, because I really enjoy baking.
Listen,
so I'm
I
always
really
looking-
enjoyed a cake that you
Oh,
recently
that's
made
right.
for Susan's
Well, there you
40th,
go.
my sister's
There you
40th. So yeah, I can highly recommend your cakes.
So between cakes and looking up art and craft ideas for my class in school, that's pretty much what I've been doing recently.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Very good. Okay, so a couple of books and lots of Google searches for cakes and P2 stuff. Okay, let's move on then. The topic of our conversation is linked to where we're going to be going on Sunday with building gospel bridges, with talking about our calling as disciples of Jesus to witness to others, to be ambassadors of Christ and our faith. So. Basically, what happened with this was I was chatting with Mark Jones, who's actually here in the room listening in as well. But I was chatting with Mark, and he relayed a story that had been told at your home group, Caroline and Gemma. And really just the story, Gemma, of how you came to faith and how, if I'm right in saying this, Tim, your husband, came back to faith. Would that be fair?
Yep.
And really just thought that would be a really good story to tell as part of what we're talking about. I asked Mark to go and speak to you guys, and with fear and trepidation, you said yes, that you would be prepared to actually extend the audience for this story. You told it in home group, but now we'll hopefully be able to get this out to more people in Glenabbey just to hear this, simply for the sake of their encouragement, of our encouragement. So that's the idea, and I'm just going to ask you each to tell the story from your perspective. So, Gemma, the story sort of centres on you and Tim. So maybe begin with you, and you can tell us a little bit just about how this all came about and how these girls were connected with your story, and how you came then eventually to make the decision that you would put your faith and trust in Christ.
Okay, so I think, well, first of all, when Caroline asked me to phone me about this, I thought I couldn't. I think the first thought was I'm not worthy at all to do this, to speak. And then I had to just take a deep breath and say okay and just trust. So I suppose I grew up in Scotland in a small town in the northeast. My mum raised me mainly herself. I've got two brothers. I was the eldest. There wasn't any faith in our home. I learnt about Jesus through school and a little bit through my nan, who had a little bit of a faith, and she shared that with me. But on the whole, that was it really. And I just grew up just like everyone else. I didn't really know anyone that went to church where I lived. So I grew up, couldn't decide what to do in my life, ended up choosing to be a nurse. That led me to Edinburgh. So I would have been 23-ish. I did my nurse training, was happy, studying, having a social life, and met Tim then through a friend who... So I was flatmates with a guy called Keith and Tim grew up together. So Tim came over to see him for his birthday. It's what birthday was? I can't remember what birthday it was, but it was one of his big ones. And that's how Tim and I met. And then I very quickly then moved to Belfast. So I was in the last year of my degree when we met, and I ended up moving over here quite quickly once I graduated. So that's how Tim and I met, and we got married in 2012. So we had Brodie in 2013, and I probably wasn't that settled here. I did toy with moving back to Scotland quite a bit. I just hadn't found my kind of group, my people, and God was still not something Tim and I really talked about. He'd tell me about his. So Tim, I'll go back to Tim because Tim grew up.
Yeah, it'd be good.
Tim grew up with attending a Presbyterian church in Green Island, I think it was. And is that right, Caroline? You probably know better than I do.
I think that's right. I think he maybe went to the primary school that my wife teaches.
Yes,
am I right?
yes, he did. He went to Green Island Primary.
Green
Yeah.
Island Primary.
And his mum and dad, attended church in Green Island and still do. So he did have a faith as a child and lost it in his teenage years. And again, he would say he was kind of perfectly happy, the way things were going for him. And we got married and ended up moving to Ballyclare. So the funny thing is...
What age was Brodie at this point?
So Brodie would have been 2. No. When we moved to Ballyclare, Brodie would have been going into P1. But from he was 2, we were driving around Northern Ireland on a Sunday afternoon trying to decide where to move to. Okay. Because Tim, honestly, we were over in Cumber at one point we just didn't really, I didn't know Northern Ireland. We were living in Jordanstown at the time, which we really liked. But as a lot of people know, is quite expensive. So we were looking for somewhere a little bit more reasonably priced. And eventually we just settled on Ballyclare, I think because I'd heard the schools were good, and I really, really was obsessed with living somewhere where I could walk into the town, because where we were living in Jordanstown, we couldn't quite do that. So I was really focused on that. So we ended up in Ballyclare, and still no spiritual aspect to our marriage or to our home. So Brodie's 5, Bethany would be 3, and we bought a new build in Readers. So that's kind of where
best decision, Gemma, best decision.
Things started to change for us in a really good way.
Okay, because half of Glenabbey were probably there. Yeah, okay, we know that straight. Yeah, okay. So talk us through how things changed from there then, and maybe bring in your connection with these 2 girls here with you in the room as well.
Okay, so going back to what I said about having not really found my people. So a part of the reason, it was somebody had said to me at one point, and I can't remember who it was, have you ever thought of going to church? And it was really because I still didn't really know anyone. I'd been here for quite a few years, and we were we were the first out of all of our friends to have children, and I moved quite far away from my friends because a lot of them were all still in Scotland. So that had been in the back of my mind, and so to be completely honest, it was probably more from a social point of view. I thought that was kind of there in the background, and then Brodie started P1, and I saw Carol Ann at one of the P1 morning, or when the principal does the talk, and I remember seeing you, and then I saw you again in Marks and Spencer's in the Abbey Centre, and you were with your family and I was with my family, and I said, Tim, I know that girl from school, I'm going to go and say hello, which isn't really like me at all, because usually I'm quite shy sometimes. And we went over and said hello, and that was kind of the first time we kind of stood and chatted for a while, didn't we? Yeah. And then
so you were the friendly one, is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah, which you would think actually.
It's so not like you. But from obviously knowing you very well now, I look back at that and think that must have taken a lot of courage for you to actually come over. Whereas in Marks and Spencer's that day, I thought, oh, look at this really attractive family coming over to speak to us. But actually, you were probably really nervous about saying hello. And I think maybe, had we crossed paths in 6 Mile or something?
I think it was after that. Yeah. So then we didn't, that was it. It was just a chat. And then I think we just started seeing each other around
We were
Ballyclare
uniform shopping. We were getting the kids' uniforms. So there you are.
The glamour.
The glamour of it all. Yeah.
And then, of course, but then this is after I've skipped past the fact that we'd moved in next to Jenni.
How did you skip that?
The most important part of the story.
Readers.
And at this point, I think we probably hadn't had coffee or anything together. We probably just said hello a few times, sort of.
Tim always tells me the story of whenever you moved in, the first person he saw was
your dad,
Gilbert, standing in the driveway.
That is true, actually.
I love that.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So we had moved in a few months before you, and I can remember them
and you thought
them arriving. Well, actually, I think it was another girl neighbour had said, "Oh, your neighbours have landed," and I hadn't got to see it, but then we did, and that was the rest of that was.
So
brilliant.
Unbeknownst to you, you were getting befriended by two
Yeah.
people from the same church,
Yeah.
but they
Basically.
weren't in cahoots at all.
No.
Okay,
no,
right,
not
okay. So
at all.
keep on talking us through then.
And then, gosh, then we started meeting up a bit more. And I think you told me you went to church?
Yeah, so I think it was at the school gate one morning, and we'd spent a lot of time talking at the school gate. I think our paths had crossed at 6 Mile, the dreaded swimming lessons, and we had sort of said, oh, you know, we'll get coffee, and then I think I just invited you over to the house one day after the school drop off. I said, look, why don't you come over? And we'd done that quite a few times, just having coffee, maybe went for a walk once or twice. And then I maybe shared with you that I came to church, and you had said that you had been thinking about getting involved with a church, that you'd never been to church. And I said, look, you know, there's great stuff for the children. And I think I said, look, no pressure, you'd be more than welcome to come along. And that if you were coming, to give me a text and I would meet you at church. And I remember you leaving that day and me thinking, oh, did that come across really like, oh, I don't know how that's landed. I remember you leaving and I was thinking that maybe sounded like I was trying to convert her or something. And so I never mentioned it again. And then the morning you texted me to say, we're coming to Glenabbey this morning. I remember going, oh, cannot believe this.
Was that straight away? Was that the same way?
It was maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe later.
Because Jenny, I can't remember what we talked about, but you've clearly forgotten this.
No, totally not. My facial expression right now, totally. No, I remember.
We had talked about, you brought me here to check out, I was worried about Brodie and Bethany, and you know, what to do about them, and so you brought me to kind of have a little look around, show me church.
I get that.
Jeez, you probably don't
You've no
remember.
recollection.
Honestly, is that really bad?
And I still, that's the first time I'm hearing that. I didn't know you'd done that.
There we go.
It genuinely was totally separate. It's
Totally
So much
separate.
has happened.
Okay.
That's why. That's my excuse.
Well, Caroline, let me ask you then, just to go back and start the story from your perspective, and then we'll tie all the threads together. Yeah. But I suppose just in terms of your motivation, was this was just normal? Here's another parent, opportunity to make friends, that sort of idea, or was it different than that for you?
Yeah, so, I mean, look, I would not put myself out there as somebody who historically has been very confident about witnessing, as they say, or sharing my faith. I'm a nurse. That is something totally different. I'm not a big theologian either. Do you know, this was genuinely just... I'd seen Gemma a couple of times, and I'd honestly mean that. When we met them in Marks and Spencer's that day, I actually thought, gosh, you know, here's a really trendy, lovely couple who seem to have it all together. Do you know, I did, and I genuinely thought it's another school mum. You know, we were both in a very similar position. Our kids are quite close in age, where, you know, we were dropping the kids off and doing that. I thought, right, let's have a coffee. And I mean, the topic of God didn't actually ever come up in those first maybe 5 or 6 coffees. We were just chatting about life and the busyness and the big change of kids going to school. And there was never any kind of intention of, you know, I'm going to get this girl along to church. It just came up naturally in conversation. And for me, you know, I was at a new stage of my life where I genuinely just wanted somebody to be to have a friendship, you know, somebody that you could share life with. And one thing that I shared with Gemma sort of afterwards was, and I never even thought about it until after, but about 1.5 years before we met Tim and Gemma, I had a conversation with Andrew, just that I really felt in my heart that a lot of time we spent socially with people tended to be people from church. And do you know, the Great Commission, go into all the world and preach the gospel, and I'm never going to be a preacher. That is not my calling, but that is everybody's calling, actually, you know, to share their faith. And
you're doing my talk for me on Sunday morning here. That's good.
But it's something, sorry.
It's all right.
But it is something that I have always found difficult. And so I shared this with Andrew and I said, I just have a real burden in my heart that actually all our social time is spent with Christians. Like, we're not doing what God's told us to do. And I remember Andrew laughing, and as you know, he always takes things so seriously. I remember him laughing and saying, well, we're not going out to hunt non-Christians down, Caroline, like seriously. And I said, I know, but I just think we should pray more that we get more opportunity and that, God maybe brings people into our life. And so we had been praying that, and it's probably one of the few times in our married life, much to our disgrace probably, that we have prayed together for something, and that we just really felt that God had put that on our hearts, and we didn't really know where it was going or what would happen, but we prayed it together. And about 1.5 years later was the first time we met Tim and Gemma, and when we met Tim and Gemma, I didn't even think.
You didn't put them together?
Oh, we've been praying for like non-Christian friends, and here they are. That did not even enter my mind, and that might be hard to believe, but it genuinely didn't. And in Gemma, all I saw was a school mum in the same situation as me, absolutely exhausted, trying to deal with working in the NHS. And that was it. And we just became friends, really, didn't we? From there.
That's great. No, that's good to hear that sort of background to things. Jenni, what about you in terms of moving into Readers, this hotbed of Glenabbey people, and obviously the place where so much witness is obviously going to take place? Has there been a sense of that, of any of that sort of intentionality that Caroline's talking about, or not really, just a case of?
No, it's a funny one. We'd only moved into Readers a few months, maybe it was actually a month before. I think you moved in the July. We moved in the June. So we'd only been in a month before. We were living in Ballymena before that, and actually really struggling to reach and become friends with neighbours in the area we were in. And it was at that time, it was a decision of what church, being closer to church and our church family, and what we want for our kids and things like that. And I think I knew quite a few Glenabbey people lived in Readers, and it nearly made it feel quite safe or something that, the kids would have other kids around. So that was a big draw, and house became available. It just so happened it's next door to Gemma and to Tim. But it wasn't ever, I don't think, it's the same as Caroline saying, I'd be quite similar in that way, in that... I think I remember being on a beach missions team a very, very long time ago, and them trying to talk about, you have to go out and reach out to people and go, and that just terrified me, that you needed to go and just randomly speak to somebody and say, and that's the truth. And I'm still probably not overly confident at it, but it can come so unintentionally, and this Gemma and Tim moving in next door is not something that I necessarily thought of like you, Caroline. I think I was praying at that time actually for opportunities in work, because that for me was the place I was going to all the time, and that's where the opportunities, to live out my Christian faith should be and share my faith. Little did I know, your neighbour, wasn't really thinking about neighbourhood, I guess. And then the friendship just developed from then, and having kids helped, and talking about, and they all went to the same school, so that also helps, and then it just became through natural conversations. And when Gemma said she was wanting to come along to Glenabbey, it was just brilliant, and you wanted to try and encourage her there, because I knew it was early days. I didn't want to terrify her either and put pressure on her. I wanted them to, this to be a decision for them, but it's been a brilliant journey to walk with Tim and Gemma, and so not intentional, okay. But I've learned a lot from it, if that makes sense.
Okay, and we'll come back to that. We'll come back to what you've learned.
I was going to say quickly that first morning that Tim and I came, so it was obviously our kids were tiny, so it was the 9:30 service, and we were like from like 9 o'clock all ready to go, nervously waiting, because we weren't going to leave until you left, so we were waiting for you in the car. But you guys are always late.
That's not. Don't say that in front of Chris.
So it was like we're so
really
stressed.
trying.
It was
I'm
like
watching
20,
this Sunday now.
9:20, and you still hadn't left the house. And me and Tim,
can I blame Daniel for this one? It's really not his fault.
We were nervous.
So you were nervous and late on your first morning because
Yeah.
you couldn't leave until the McClellands were
Oh
left.
dear.
Okay.
Oh
Gemma,
dear. That's such a witness.
Talk me through your decision behind that, or your choice to go for somebody who has no background with church or anything like that. What was the thinking? Why did you choose to do that and take that step, I suppose?
Well, I think obviously I knew Tim had grown up in a church, and he told me good stories, happy stories of being at church, and I always really respected. I do really respect his mum and dad. They're just a real lovely, gentle Christian couple. I just thought, I'll just give this a go. The other part of it was we really felt like our children would need more of a community growing up, and I suppose there was a part of me wanting them to grow up well, and to be surrounded by good people, and I think that was probably a little bit of a pull. I can't say that I came to church the first day thinking that I was believing in any way that I would find a faith, or I think it was really just those sorts of things that were kind of pulling us to go. And Tim had said yes straight away when I'd suggested it, so I just took that as a sign. And
Okay.
Yeah.
So all those sort of very normal family-based reasons, but not thinking of, right, I'm going to explore
Become
this as
a
a faith
Christian
at
now?
this stage
No.
at all. Okay,
No.
so talk me from there to where then you arrived, I suppose, if in the best way you can.
I'm trying to remember how long I was sort of coming before I did come to faith, and I think it was less than a year, but it would have been more than 6 months, I think. And I definitely just sat each Sunday listening and just being open-minded, really, to what I was hearing. And then then Caroline sent me. So I can't remember. I think I must have been asking you a lot of questions.
I think that is
Talk about the
exactly
questions,
what
yeah.
happened, and I was completely
Overwhelmed.
stressed out because I felt that once you started coming to church, then I kind of in my head thought, great, it's all over to you, God, happy days, job done. And then Gemma was like asking questions, and do you know what? In a lot of ways, it really sparked something in me, because I felt really convicted that you had such a thirst for the scripture and to get to know the character of God, that it actually reignited something in me where I felt like, goodness me, do you know that new Christian desire to know this Jesus and God? And, I've been a Christian since I was a child, and it really did reignite that kind of desire to get to know God in me. But it also probably really exposed my lack of Bible knowledge, if the truth be told. And Gemma would ask me questions, sometimes just a wee text. I've been thinking about this, and, what about this and what about that? And I think I went back to my gospel hall days where I just said I would read I remember telling you to read John because I just thought that was one of the gospels. That's good. We'll start with John.
That's a good job. That
And
was
I
a good
remember
answer.
saying, I think maybe you should read John, and and I but they were really good questions, and it definitely helped me, and it challenged me and encouraged me, and you did just have a real desire to know more at that point, didn't you? And I think you're not somebody who would go into something blindly,
No.
you want to know what exactly it is, and so I could see that in your personality at that point then too.
And it challenged a lot of my thoughts, and being. We've talked about this before. You've said to me, "You're a bit of a feminist, Gemma," and and there would be that in me, it challenged a lot of my very liberal upbringing and side, and I really did. I started to pray that's the point, I think, where I started to pray and just ask for kind of guidance and help. And if this is all actually real, then will you give me a sign of some sort? You know, those sorts of prayers. And so you had sent me. So so Cloughlin Lane was doing like a series on Romans 5, and it was the flow.
Yes,
I still have them.
Yes,
I still have them.
Yes.
And you must have been like, I can't cope with this anymore, Gemma. She sent me an episode, and I was like,
Is that the Ortberg stuff? No.
Yeah.
You do.
Yes.
Okay.
It's American.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have done the flow in Glenabbey. So I've been around Glenabbey since 2006, and I think I've maybe looked at the flow 3 times in my Glenabbey lifetime, and every time I look at it I get something new out of it. And it was one series that I've done in the past that I was so challenged by, and so it was probably that's probably why I've shared it.
It was recorded in the 90s. They were in the 90s. Those
so you
ones?
just basically franchised out the
Yes.
answers.
And you sent me one, and then I remember being like, "Can you send me the rest?" I just was consumed by them. Like I just really, they just met me where I was, and and then so I did have. I do feel I've talked about this before with Caroline. I do feel very lucky that I did experience, that moment of clarity where everything all of a sudden just was different. And I know that that's a privilege because not everybody does experience that. And I was actually walking the dog along Cloughlin Lane when it happened, which is, before it was all changed for the new developments. And that's when I just remember everything kind of changed for me, and everything I saw everything through Jesus, and it was different. And I didn't even tell Tim right away. I kept it here. I just kept it to myself for a while. I don't know if I think maybe I didn't want to push him into anything.
Okay.
Because we hadn't had a conversation about where he was at, but we were obviously coming together, and we were talking about church, and we were talking about what we'd heard, but that was kind of where we were at the time.
Okay. Interesting. Really good to hear all that. Anything either of you guys want to add to that at all, or respond to that?
I just remember a memory for me there recently is your baptism as well, and that what a special, when you came to tell me that you had made that decision to get baptised. So this is amazing, this is incredible. So to be there with you watching that was pretty special as well. So yeah.
Gemma, how did this interact then with Tim, and what was the timing? Because he also obviously made a decision after you. Then
and we didn't have one big conversation, and you probably have to ask him when his wee moment was. But it just became evident that we had both had been saved, and then we were able to start kind of, I suppose, our marriage and our family in the way we related to each other as husband and wife, and the way we parent the children, that all obviously started to change. And
I remember you coming to Cloughlin Lane with Tim to home group for the first time. I remember you were really quite nervous about coming.
I don't remember that.
Was this before or after coming to faith, or was it?
Probably after,
I think
you'd been trying to get me to come for a while, and I was like,
it was maybe before Tim, was it? But after you,
I think
it was after you, but before Tim had come back to faith. Because I remember you coming on a home group weekend.
Yes, that's right.
And I think it was after that, wasn't it, that Tim sort of came back to God too. And I was probably nervous at that point because I knew that Gemma was really new to faith and was so excited about her faith, and it obviously had dramatically changed Gemma's life. And I was encouraging her to come to home group, which is, it can seem a scary thing to just turn up to somebody's door with 30 other people they don't know. And so when they were coming, this is probably why I remember it more, is because I felt really anxious and nervous that this was probably the first time that my new friend, who I loved dearly and loved hanging out with and going for coffee and out for dinner with and did all the social stuff with, this was probably the first time that Gemma was going to see me in a capacity of leading a home group. And I was really nervous about that, and how that would look to her. And was I going to really frighten her off, bringing her to a home group? And Tim and Gemma came, and it was as if they had been there forever, and yeah. And I think you've then obviously a whole circle of friends now out of that,
Do you remember how you found that first night? No.
I don't remember the first home, I remember the first cell. It was at Elaine's. And I remember being nervous. I remember bringing food because that's
what Cooke Lane do. we bring food.
I made pulled pork. I remember that. And I was nervous. But I probably did. Obviously, it was a different side to you I'd seen. But I didn't run away.
I know, which is good.
Just stuck with you.
Gemma, talk then and just give us a bit of perspective on, I suppose, the impact the two friendships had on you in this journey.
Well, I was going to say I'll not cry, because I always cry at these things. I'm surprised I haven't started crying yet. I suppose, it's been a real privilege to get to know both Carol and Jenni really, really well, and our friendships have grown, since we met, and they both have been people who I've been able to go to with questions that I probably would have felt embarrassed to ask other people, and are both really good at kind of directing me and
to something else. That's the answer. No, what are you joking?
And supporting me, and yeah.
And equally that for us too, I think so when did we meet? 2018?
I think so, yeah.
I think as like Tim and Andrew are 17. Great friends.
I was 17. I'm thinking
well,
it was before
17,
Rory was
wasn't it?
born in 2018,
Yes,
and
it
you
must
were
have been
there
17.
for that.
Yeah.
So yes, it must have been the year before that one.
And we've done holidays together, and and every now and again, these memories that come up on your phone, and just there last week, memories come up of us going to Donegal, and and it's nothing super spiritual. It's just actually being there and sharing life together, and for Andrew got a great mate in Tim, and they go to football together and do all of that kind of thing. So, it's not just always about what you're able to share from a biblical side of thing, but I think, life is so busy and everybody gets caught up in the hamster wheel of life that actually one of the greatest things that you can give to somebody is time. And for me, Gemma gave me time. She was prepared on a Friday morning or whatever it was to come and have coffee with me and give me time. And I think probably both of us being nurses maybe gave us a common ground where, if I've had a rubbish week at work, I know that Gemma understands it and she gets it. And, so for me, it was just somebody that was actually prepared to sacrifice a few hours of her week to come and meet up with me.
Yeah. So it is something I've been reflecting on a lot. I've been thinking about this. When it comes to sharing our faith, when it comes to all of that, sometimes we think we need to be big evangelists, or we need to have all the right answers. I think you're admitting that you didn't have all the right answers, Jenni. I think you're admitting the same. You didn't have all the right answers. I think we think that we maybe need to just get these people in front of a proper evangelist or something like that. But the reality is that we're human beings. We're not just rational brains. It's not just about getting the right answer to the right question and that's it all sorted. actually it's about sharing life, it's about relationship, it's about friendship, it's about being, as we'll talk about in Ephesians, children of the light in terms of people seeing the light of Christ within us. And it's that whole package. Would that be fair in your own experience?
Absolutely. It was just, it was when you'd said there about how it works. It's both ways. What I've learned is that, I might not have might not have been able to answer every question, but it started with the wee things, simply being a neighbour of, can I borrow some garlic, or whatever it was, to then a bit more intentional, to then going out for a walk. Gemma got me into running a little bit. I'll not say too much more than that because it's not really a big thing, but and then in our going out for that, being able to talk about life. And so since for me, since you've come to faith and you've been at church and everything, I now feel like you've become a person that I'm walking and running sometimes through life with that I am sharing things that are going on with me. You're doing the same like you would do with other people. So it's become important for me as well. So what started out as not intentional has become intentional. I would now seek Gemma out and say, Gemma, we need to go for this run now. I keep saying run because I want to throw that in there. No, I'm trying to persuade myself to go. So it's been such an important step for me, and what I've learnt from our friendship and the things that you're going through have taught me so much as well, even to be praying for you, for asking you to pray for me, and I don't have all the answers, and I just say go see Gilbert or Chris.
Go see Gilbert, no.
Go see Gilbert, but
no, that's good. Can I finish with a couple of questions? Just, I suppose, as you've reflected on this all happened obviously a few years ago. You've talked about it a few times. Caroline, from your perspective, what have you learned about this whole area of sharing faith? If you could say, you've talked about prayer as one thing. You've talked about that sort of. There's an intentionality, maybe not really, really clear, but in terms of your prayer life, that was there. God was answering prayers that you maybe even forgot you'd prayed. But what sort of things have you learned?
Yeah, so I think the first thing would be careful what you pray for is the first thing. Because God might actually answer that prayer and then you have to do something about it. But no, I think it is that, I as I've said already, I don't, I'm a nurse. I'm not an evangelist. However, I do have God's word in my heart, and I know that I am here on earth to share my faith, and I do struggle with that, and I will continue to struggle with that. But I guess that prayer was us really just asking God to give opportunities, and I relied on him for strength, and I know Andrew would say the same. Andrew wouldn't claim at all to be very articulate, in talking about the Bible or his faith healer, but we very much would love that people can see us just live it out in the everyday, and so prayer, yes, is a big one. I think what I've already said just about taking time, I think that is so important. And with any relationship, you have to invest time in it. I have to invest time in my relationship with God, but equally I have to invest time in my relationship with family and friends and church family, and that's a key thing. You're never going to get to that point with somebody where you can share your faith if you don't spend time with them. For me, the idea of going up, like you were saying about being on the beach and just approaching random people, I doubt, unless God performs a miracle, will never happen for me. For me, it's about just spending that time with people in the everyday, and I think it's only at that point you'll have the opportunity to share. And
I think that ties in. The reason we've called what we're talking about in Sunday morning building gospel bridges is you need to build a bridge for the gospel to move along, and the friendship is that, the time is that, the sitting around coffee. That's you have to do that groundwork first, don't you? In that sense, for
you
that.
Said something a couple of weeks ago, Chris, in the talk on prayer. I'm going to say it was the thing.
It was, yeah.
And it was just, and it's coming up in Ephesians 2, but And it's just stuck with me for the last few weeks, and I keep repeating it. And it was simply from Ephesians, to him who can do immeasurably more. That phrase has just blown me away many days recently, just thinking that God uses us in more places, in more ways that we can actually think, and that we can't limit him to those things. So it's just much bigger. You can't measure his love for us. You can't measure what he can do with us and the opportunities that it gives us. And little did we think that an opportunity was next door, but and little did I think I'd be used in that and be part of your journey a little bit. And that is to God, and so to him who can do immeasurably more.
And again, as I think ahead, even though this will be released after I've talked on Sunday, as I think ahead, the big things we'll be talking about are the fact that we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to serve others, to love others, to preach Christ. If you think about the passage I'm going to be talking about from 2 Corinthians 5, or 2 Corinthians 4, sorry. But actually the big thing that I'll be talking about as well is the responsibility to bring somebody to faith is not actually ours. It's God. It's God who takes the scales off people's eyes to show who Christ actually is. And that's the key thing. That responsibility is not ours. And whenever we release ourselves from that responsibility and just engage in the privilege it is to share Jesus with others in simple ways, then hopefully that takes the pressure off. But and yes, you're absolutely right. He can't be limited in any way. Gemma, can I finish with you and just ask, I suppose, from somebody who has been in recent years and in their adulthood and so on the other side, how would you encourage others who are, like these girls have honestly shared, nervous about sharing their faith, about sharing their, and talking about Christ in their lives and all of that sort of thing? What would you say to people in that similar situation, I suppose?
I would say just be yourself, I think, and just be real and be genuine, and see what God does in that. Another friend who's a Christian had said to me, a work friend, and she says she is astounded by, because she's seen me through this all, and the change, she sees the changes in me that I don't always see. But she did say to me once that she was worried that she hadn't done enough, and could there have been anything that she could have done? And genuinely, honestly, my answer was no. And it was just, God works the way He works, and this was the path that He had me on. So I think just be yourself.
Okay, brilliant. Really appreciate that. Listen, I really enjoyed that conversation. I know you were nervous about sitting around here,
No.
But it's been absolutely great. So appreciate it, and just how that will hopefully encourage others, in their own nervous witnessing and being ambassadors for Christ with their neighbours and their friends and their work colleagues and so on. So thank you very much for giving us your time this evening. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.